Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Academy. I'm Graham Richmond and I'm with Alex Brown for this lesson on recommendation letters. So Alex, this is actually the first lesson. We're going to do a few of them on recommendations for business school. They're typically, it varies, but anywhere from 1 to, in some rare cases, 3 letters of recommendation required as a part of the application. What are these things?
Yeah, I mean, basically, they're an opportunity for a third party to endorse a candidate. The admissions reader has read the essay. So, typical order, you look at the resume, look at the data forms, read the essays. Now I'm turning to the recommendations, and I want to see that, what I've learned about this candidate is validated by a third person.
Yeah, and who are they usually coming from?
So the obvious choice would be the candidate's immediate supervisor.
Yeah.
Certainly someone that has direct work experience with the candidate at a more senior level. So that's why the immediate supervisor is the default choice, if possible.
And, we'll do a lesson that's really based on who you should choose to write them, and we'll dive deep into that. But I think this is a good primer. The other thing I wanted to mention is just that in terms of what the letters are, luckily, some schools have adhered to a standard format for the recommendation form. Now, not all schools do, but I think it's instructive in terms of a candidate understanding what's being asked. And so I wanted to share, there are these 4 questions in that form. And the questions are, describe your interactions with the applicant. So that's just to sort of give the committee a sense of who this person is that's writing the letter and how they know the applicant. Obviously, they also ask, how does the applicant compare to other people that you've supervised in that same role or across your organization? So again, they're trying to figure out where you fall on the kind of scale. And this one's always a favorite of mine. They also ask for the recommender to provide an instance where they gave you, the candidate, constructive feedback and how the candidate reacted to that. So that's a really good mechanism for understanding whether or not the candidate is open to feedback, is willing to grow and take that on board. And then there's kind of an open-ended question in most recommendation letters, which is there anything else you want us to know about this candidate? Which I recommend, I think that, the writers should make use of that space. Yeah. It's usually a really great opportunity to add some details. How do schools use these letters? I mean, you mentioned that as a reader, you're coming to them at the end, after you've read the file. But is there anything in particular that you're looking for? I mean, other than, it's a third-party voice. Yeah. But are you looking for corroboration of stories, or what are you?
A little bit of corroboration, certainly validation. So I want to, again, I've learned a lot about this candidate through the candidate's voice. So now I want to hear from someone else, well, typically 2 other folk in most business schools' case. So it's a little validation, little corroboration. It might be an opportunity for the recommender to actually introduce a new sort of experience or example that the candidate themselves didn't address. So it could be sort of complementary and additive in that fashion. But yeah, I think they're really important in terms of stacking them up relative to other media and other elements of the application. I wouldn't put them in front of the essays. I probably wouldn't put them in front of other elements, but they're still very important, and it's more of a corroboration, making sure everything makes sense from this sort of third party.
And I do want to mention, schools reserve the right to reach out to these recommenders, particularly late in the game if they've admitted you and want to, as you say, corroborate stuff or just have that kind of a conversation with someone. So that they're important. They play an important role in the process. The only other thing I want to really touch on in this lesson is the fact that the people writing these letters are often busy folks, right? They're senior executives often, or they're your boss, or they're someone above you in the hierarchy at your company. And so there's often this temptation where the person you've asked to write the letter comes to you and says, I'm busy, you write it, I'll sign it, we're good. So isn't that's kind of a dream come true? No? Because you're the candidate, you get to say exactly what you would want them to say about you.
It might be a dream come true, but it's actually a nightmare, but that's still a dream, right? But no, you want a different voice in your application. And it's very hard to deliberately force your writing style in a different fashion to sort of spoof this sort of recommendation process. So for one, it's just unethical, but secondly, it's not doing you any service at all. You would be really surprised, well, candidates would be really surprised how favourably third-party folks write about you. Because, you know, you'd be a little less sort of bragging, as it were. But other people, that if you've selected the right folk and you've done great work with them, they're going to want to really rave about it.
Yeah, and actually in another lesson on recommendations, we'll get into how you can make sure that the recommenders, know what to do and can really rave and support you. Yeah, I was, being a little facetious. I think a lot of candidates historically, when they hear you write it, I'll sign it, they think that's great. It's actually terrible. I agree with you. It's a nightmare. And I think it's also just because not only is there a different voice that will come across when your recommender is the person writing the recommendation, but as you say, they might just share things that it would never have occurred to you, or projects or things that they've observed you on, or things they noticed that are going to really add color to your candidacy. So, so recommendations are, maybe not more important than essays, obviously, but they're an important part of this process, and they're different from everything else in that they're this kind of third-party perspective. So very important. Up next, we are going to talk more about recommendations. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about who to pick to write your letters.